Hello, everyone, and welcome to this discussion panel for the Scottish Goddess Conference 2022. This year, the theme of the year is the Goddess of Witches, and I thought it was important we're having two discussion panels, one with younger pagans to learn about their experience about being pagans or being witches, publicly or privately, and how they find their sin. But also, I thought it would be very educational to have some elders of the international pagan community discussing about their experiences and the path in paganism, and see what they could share with us. So today we are here, and I would like to give each of them a few minutes to introduce themselves. So Andras, I got you just next on my screen. Would you start?
Sure. Good morning. It's morning for me. My name is Andras Corban Arthin. I am originally from Spain, but I was raised in Spain, in Cuba, and in Puerto Rico. I've lived most of my life in the United States, but I go to Europe quite often. And let's see, what can I say? I live in the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts, almost close to New York State. It's a very beautiful place. We are smack in the middle of a forest. And we've been here for 25 years or so. I'm looking forward to being part of the panel.
Thank you. I think your microphone, the volume is not too high.
Okay.
Just to let you know. So we also have Morgana, if you will introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, Morgana. Originally from England. I'm still British as far as being a citizen, but I moved to the Netherlands in the early 70s, and in between times I've also got the Dutch nationality as well. So but I always describe myself as being European, because I don't feel I understand the affinity with England, but I also have the affinity now with the Netherlands. So how did I get onto this pagan path? Well, as a young child,
we're going to start with with an introduction, and we're going to let everyone kind of introduce themselves, and then we get to the point.
Okay. So I'm just Morgana from the Netherlands.
And you can of course you can share with us your tradition if you like.
Okay, I'll start again then. Yeah. So,
okay.
You can edit this, can't you? Yeah. Of course you can. Yeah. So, hi, this is Morgana speaking. I'm currently living in the Netherlands, although I'm actually from England. And how did I get on this path? Well, I'll be telling you later.
Thank you. Fee?
Hi, Highness. Yeah. Thank you. My name's Fee, and I stay in Scotland, live in Scotland on the west coast of Scotland, which is very wet at the moment, but very beautiful place. And I've been reading about the occult basically since I was in my mid-20s, which was now some time ago. And I'm currently now Gardnerian Wiccan.
Thank you. I look forward to hear about your path. We have also Jean Fowler. Please, Jean, if you will introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name's Jean. I was born on the West Coast, well, mainly in central Scotland, but moved to Edinburgh around 1975. I've been practicing, well, I was originally initiated into Alexandrian, but in the same year was then transformed into Gardnerian Wiccan. So been practicing that ever since.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for you know, being part of this panel, each of you. So beginnings, pagan beginnings. How was your introduction to paganism, Andreas?
Oh, well, it happened quite a long time ago. In 1969, I had been raised Catholic, but I had given up with that. And right after finishing secondary school, I moved up to Boston to go to college. And there I met a couple through a friend of mine, who's my friend said, these people will be very interesting to you. You will get along with them. And it was a couple, married couple from Scotland, about maybe twice my age or so. And they had been living in the Boston area for a few years. And they had these practices that in their family, their community, that, as they put it, they had had forever. And the practices didn't really have a name. They didn't really, they used a Gaelic term for who they were, but they translated that as witchcraft, although they didn't think of themselves so much as witches in a very specific sense. And they thought of themselves as pagans, but what I would say, you know, pagan with a lowercase p, that they had a way of life that was non-Christian and was very earth-centered and so on. And so I became not only their friend, but their student for 5 years. And that was my introduction to it. And after my teachers left, I started looking for other people in the community, and that I began meeting people like Gardnerians, Alexandrians, Druids, heathens, and, you know, so on.
Okay. And where did you find yourself at this point? What do you do?
Me? What did I
do?
like,
what do you do in the pagan community now?
Right now? Okay.
Yeah. Because I know, but
okay. No, all right, sure. I found in 1977, I founded a pagan community called Earth Spirit in the greater Boston area. And it has since grown very big and very wide. So I'm still very much a part of that. I also am president of the European Congress of Ethnic Religions, which is an organization that was founded in 1997, 98 in Lithuania. It was an attempt by people who had been living behind the Iron Curtain, who had been keeping some of their ethnic ancestral practices alive, to be able to come out more publicly and to connect with other people who were in a similar position, and then explore what that might be. So back in 2012, they elected me president. I'm not quite sure why, because I don't live in Europe, but nevertheless. So I've been doing that for a long time now, and we put on mostly a Congress I'd say mostly every 2 years or so, in a different part of Europe. And then beyond that, I've worked since the mid-70s in the interfaith movement. So I was a member of the board of trustees of the Parliament of the World's Religions for 13 years. I finished that a couple of years ago. So I'm not doing a lot of interfaith work right now, but I'm looking forward to getting back into it again.
Oh, thank you so much. Morgana, could you tell us a bit about your path?
Yes, well, I was just going to say that when I was about 8, I was obviously at school, and I always remember thinking, you know, when people would say to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always used to think, I want to be a priestess. I want to be a priestess. But I realized that was not going to go down very well. It's a Christian school. But that actually remained one of my major quests, actually, to, you know, how could I become a priestess? And that actually started with my move to the Netherlands. I was, in fact, trained as a teacher by then. So I did actually, you know, when you grow up, you want to be a teacher. But I moved to the Netherlands in 1974. But it was in 1979 that after a trip, after a year in India, although I was kind of living in the Netherlands, but I did spend a year in India on the overland trip that many people made in the 1970s. But when I came back, that's when I seriously found out more about Wicca, and ended up in England. And in England, amazing how things kind of work out, but ended up meeting some people in Brighton, near to the New Forest. And to cut a very long story short, within 3 weeks, they asked us, my partner and I at the time, Merlin, if we'd like to be initiated. That's how it went. This is into a Gardnerian coven, and that's basically how it went in those days. The Gardnerian community at the time was very closed, so it was kind of a miracle if you found them. But when you did find them, they were very, very open. So, of course, that's how we ended up being initiated. Of course, the first thing we did when we got home wasn't to actually organise a coven, because we were just initiated. But what we did do was to form already a network, or at least the start of a network. And we also launched a magazine, which is still running, still active, although digital. But it's called Wiccan Raid online at the moment. But it was because of the magazine, of course, that we also came into contact with many other people. Well, I said many other people. At that time, there weren't that many Gardner initiates around, actually. But we did meet a lot of other people involved in Gardnerian Wicca. So that's how we got really involved. So from the late 1979, as I say, and with the launch of the magazine, of course, that's meant that we were in contact with a lot of other people involved in Gardnerian Wicca, but also with Wicca in general.
And what do you do now? Can you resume your experience in the pagan community?
Well, from 1979/1980-ish, of course, I've been involved in, first of all, with Wicca. But in the mid-90s, I also became involved with Pagan Federation. And by that time, I was, contact with other people in Europe. And some of our initiates were also in Europe, in Germany, particularly, and other places within Europe. So my contacts were beginning to expand anyway. But my work with Pagan Federation was absolutely vital, because that's how I met Jean, I think. Because Jean was also involved with Pagan Federation, and many of my contacts actually come from the contact with Pagan Federation. Beyond that, I was also interested in interfaith. Many pagans aren't interested in interfaith, but I thought it was really vital that I understood really what it was like for other people from different faiths. And in 2004, I came across, actually it was at the Parliament of World Religions in Barcelona in 2004, that I met Don Frew, who was also an avid critique of specifically Gardnerian Wicca, and has published many articles about Gardnerian Wicca in response to Aidan Kelly, actually, but that's another story. But he also introduced me. There's Andros laughing. Yeah, we know all about Aidan Kelly.
I remember. I have scars.
Oh, well, yeah. But Don actually also introduced me to United Religions Initiative, URI, and from there on, I started learning a little bit more about what URI was all about. And one of the things that I really liked about URI was their openness towards Indigenous people, so people of the earth. And of course, I felt very comfortable talking about my pagan traditions and my pagan practices within that context. So my interfaith work started right about 2008, when I actually connected with URI people in the Netherlands. So they became our, in a sense, our preferred interfaith partner, if you like. And that's how I got involved in interfaith. Now, that interfaith work with URI, in between times, I'm now a global trustee for the multi-region, so the interfaith work is probably my central work at the moment.
Thank you for sharing a lot of experience. Let's hear Fee, if you would like to.
Sorry about that, Ness, just trying to unmute myself.
No worries.
Okay, lovely to meet everyone again. I came into, well, I started out as Church of England, Episcopalian, and as you know, did all the bits, sang in the choirs, and I loved that side of it, and I found it really, I suppose, fulfilling. You know, I really enjoyed the music and everything. But what I didn't enjoy was, in particular, the west of Scotland Catholic Protestant conflict, which is very live, it's still live. I don't know that it's quite as bad as it was. It's perhaps more hidden. I think people are a bit more cautious about being discriminatory towards people of different faiths in public now with recent legislation in Scotland. But anyway, going back to that past, that really I couldn't remain in the church. It wasn't. I believed that there was a supreme energy or supreme divinity, but not necessarily that it was male. And I then started reading some occult books. I used to spend a lot of time in second-hand bookshops when I was younger, and I came across some occult books. I started reading. It was all sorts of works that I was reading. There was Carlos Castaneda. Many people will be familiar with that. Kenneth Meadows Crowley, Israel Regardie, a whole range of occult writers. And then I noticed in the local wee occult shop, I noticed a poster for a Druid conference. So I went along to that, and that was my sort of first step into actually, you know, I want to take this further. And I then met some people who agreed to train me. There's I wouldn't wish to dwell on that too much because there's some good and some bad within that. But essentially, I certainly feel as though I found my home in Wicca. I feel it fulfills my spiritual needs in a whole host of ways, and there's some absolutely fantastic people that you can learn from out there. They're wonderful. It's not as limited, I think, as people may think it is. And I hear a lot of concerns expressed about, I don't want how I believe or what I think to be prescribed. So I think there's a certain, not lack of understanding, that sounds patronising, but there's a sort of lack of awareness of the broad extent that Wicca can be, certainly across Europe. So I think that's me. I covered everything.
And what do you do now regarding your path? I know you share.
Okay, I run a coven in the west of Scotland, which has been great. It's been a lovely experience, and just very happy, just tootling along, experimenting with different things, doing rituals as we should do, the moons and Sabbaths. And hopefully, as my partner and I are going to be retiring shortly, we're going to be able to be a bit more open, and hopefully we'll be able to do a bit more in terms of public workshops. And I'll obviously explain a bit more about why.
We talk about that.
Later.
Yeah, later.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Jane.
Hi. I've got some similarities with Fee there. I was brought up in the Church of Scotland. I think about 8 or 9. I would sort of daydream whenever the minister was doing his sort of ramble, or should I say sermon. And there was a still small voice said to me, you and your husband, I was only, as I say, about 8 or 9, will form a new religion, and that sort of stayed with me. I thought, what's this about? Obviously I'm only 8, but I had a curiosity. There was a thing about nature. There was always this thing within me that, I don't want to, I can talk to Jesus. I don't have to go through some higher, another person to get there. I can talk direct if I need to. But also, I didn't think that God should be necessarily a male. So these sort of things conflicted with me. I suppose I was a bit of a feminist at a very early age. But in my sort of late teens, early 20s, I was on a camping holiday with friends in Wick. And I happened to find this book. It was a kind of gaudy looking paperback. It was a book by June Johns called King of the Witches. It was about Alexander's. So there was an address at the back who would be witches write to, because this book really resonated with me. Although it was sensational, there were things in it that I could, I really felt attached to. So I wrote off to the address with this, Jim and myself, my husband at that, we weren't married at that point, but he wrote off to this address with a stamped addressed envelope. And it was like months later that he eventually got a reply, and it came from Dundee, postmarked Dundee. So instead of being a London address that we'd written to, we got a response from Dundee. We took ourselves up there, not knowing what we were going to meet. And we met up with this very tall, distinguished gentleman who was a good bit older than us, who took us to a part of Broughty Ferry outside Dundee. On the way there, he told us that some bodies had been washed up on the shore and some ghosts. And we started to get alarmed, but it was all just hearsay. So we met with them, and a bit like Morgana, things were different in those days. So within the weekend of meeting them, we were initiated and hand-fasted and set on our Wiccan way from that. Now, when a few years later, 6 months later, I should say, we met with Patricia Crowther. So Patricia and Arnold Crowther, we then became Gardnerian, as we were a bit of a hybrid. Then I met with John Score, who actually formed the Pagan Federation in 1971. But we met him around 1973. Later on, became involved in the Pagan Federation. Actually started the conference in Scotland along with Jim. Where did I go from there? Ran Wicca workshops, did open rituals, ran a coven. I'm now become honorary pagan chaplain at Edinburgh University. I'm also involved, I'm on the board of directors of Edinburgh Interfaith. I am a pagan celebrant, for one to trying to think of other things, but yeah, I think that's about it at the moment.
Thank you so much. I think I have to make a point about how most of you are involved with organizations that support pagans and interfaith, and that try to kind of integrate paganism with the rest of faith. And you find nowadays that everyone is too busy with their phones or their computers, and especially younger generations don't understand, because they are born in a different world. I presume that it was obvious to you, born in your generation, that it was necessary to work towards integration and towards, pagan rites and all this. But I don't know if younger generations feel that is that important to actually keep working or be part of organizations, and how important is still to fight for pagan rights. What do you think?
Definitely. I mean, thinking way back, I kept things to myself. I was, for fear of even losing my job. There was a lot of discrimination, or you weren't taken seriously. That was the biggest thing. I think people would just laugh you off as, you know, you're a crackpot. So from that point of view, I think establishing and reaching out to other organisations has helped actually bring paganism to the fore. It's made it more respected. So, you know, it's very much a part of how I operate now. I feel that I want to get involved in things because of that.
And Andras, you know, Fee and Morgana, do we have a point here? Is it still important to keep fighting?
I certainly think so. From my perspective, we're seeing a rise of the far right. We're seeing a rise in fundamentalist Christianity across, certainly in the States. And my concern would be that we could slide backwards in terms of the recognition that pagans have. And that people like Morgana and Andrea have worked incredibly hard to move us, you know, forward. And we could potentially just slide back into being viewed as being sinister, satanic, etc., without people continuing to do that work.
Yes, I was just going to say, one of the things that about Pagan Federation, of course, it started off as very much with the anti-defamation work. When PFI came on the scene in 1997, we also realized that there was still a lot of work to be done as far as quelling those we had a lot of problems with the Sunday press at the time, if you remember, and that was certainly still part of our you know, public face. And there were many people involved in witchcraft who were also being targeted from the Sunday press and what have you. So there was certainly a lot of anti-defamation work in the 90s. Today is slightly different. One of the PFI is now also a foundation. Incorporated in 2005. Now, one of the reasons we decided to have a foundation was because, as far as governmental organizations or any organization, if you don't have some sort of background, then often you're not heard, you're not listened to. And one of the things about being a foundation, of course, we could also participate in things like the transparency registers for the for the EU and what have you. Which, what I'm actually getting at is that when you engage with as an NGO, then you also have a very different audience. And one of the things that people always want is, you know, how many people are involved in paganism, you know, the body count. Now, one of the things that we've always said is one of the mission statements of PFI is to defend the rights of pagans. But we also realized it wasn't just pagans whose rights needs to be defended, but again, as I said before, people of the earth, indigenous people, certainly things like land rights certainly became more and more part of our whole work terrain and all the rest of it. And you see lots and lots of things coming up again and again, whether it was discrimination, but also what I'm looking at certainly in the last couple of years is also the effects of the doctrine of discovery, colonial injustices which were done especially in Latin America, but also from Africa, the whole question of slavery, etc. So it's become actually a much bigger issue. But we also then start realizing that anybody who's different is often marginalized. So, and again, people forget that pagans also have a bit of a publicity problem or a PR problem, simply because a lot of people don't like using the P word. And I've had to really reclaim the word pagan and put it into a bigger context. And something that's part of my interfaith work is to actually, and I don't like saying educate people, but at least inform people. I think this is one of the things that we should be really aware of now, that it's not so much that we have the problems of, you know, the witch trials, and because of course the witchcraft laws were revoked in the 1950s, which meant a lot of us could actually come out of the broom closet, including Gerald Gardner and Doreen Valiente and various other people. So it's become a lot more a broader subject in its own, but many of the fights actually do come from the Wicca, the right to be part of a feminist or female-oriented organization, group, whether we call the goddess religion or spirituality, goddess spirituality, female spirituality. There's been lots of discrimination there as well.
Yeah.
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 So,
and thank you. I think, you know, I'm loving it because it's such a load of information. And Andres, what can you say about, you know, how important it is to be part of organizations and move forward, you know, and step out, you know, and say, hey, you know, we here, we need some rights, and you know, we're just normal people that, you know, just have a faith that is different.
Sure. I think it's very important for precisely the same reasons that Morgana gave, that we can generally get a lot more done, a lot more important things done, if we work in collaboration with other people, especially people who are organized in some fashion, than by ourselves or just a small group of people. If nothing else, the level of credibility is increased when people see that you're actually part of an organization that exists, that has legal standing, that has members, and so on and so forth, that has a budget, you know, and that's somehow that makes it legitimate. But I think, and I think, going back to something that you said before, Ness, in terms of younger pagans, I think that one of the problems that we run into, my community is very intergenerational. So there are old people like me, and there are, you know, a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, a lot of people who are teenagers. We have a whole mess of children, little children. And so we really are multi-generational, which is a great thing, because right there we can learn from where the young people are and what they're going through right now. And they can also learn from us what things we're like. And I think in the pagan movement in general, what I find is that oftentimes the older people, the elders, are sort of discounted because they're not young, and they're not familiar with the ways of the younger generation, and so on and so forth. They're seen as antiquated and what have you. And of course we are, to whatever degree, but there's also a certain kind of life experience there that we hold that is very, very easy for younger people to take for granted, because they've never had to confront some of these things. And the reason they haven't had to confront those things is because we did. And at the same time, at some point, we won't be here. And so the likelihood is that then they will have to deal with those things again, because these things go in cycles. So to be better prepared for how the pagan movement is perceived in the world, how the kinds of the degree to which we present a threat to certain peoples, the degree to which we tend to be marginalized and dismissed even by other religions within the interfaith movement. So I think it's important to do all that, to get ourselves into, create communities, create organizations, have us try to work in collaboration, you know, in a friendly, respectful way, which is very difficult for pagans to do. At least in the US, I believe it's the same case in the UK. It certainly is in Spain, as Ness knows. And so for us to put those things aside and actually work together for the greater good of the pagan community, the pagan people now, and then also for the generations to come, because we are the ancestors of the future. You know, we are, that's part of our work, of the essence of being a human being, is that we learn things and pass them on to those who come behind.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think it's very important to point out that even though it was more difficult back then when you all started, and that it was a great challenge and to become public, and not everybody became public, discrimination is still happening, and it is something that happens still every day, sadly. It happens in schools, and it happens, you know, at your home. I actually had to flee my home and sell my home because I was suffering harassment from my neighbor, because she found out I was pagan, and it was horrible, to the point I had to sell my home. So I think we need young people to take the torch from us, and we need the young ones to realize that we need to continue with the fight, and we still need fighters, and that is a reality. Talking from this experience, have you faced a specific episode, or have you feel judged? Have you feel discriminated yourselves? Do you have to hide your faith at some point?
Certainly working within the public sector, I felt it necessary, my partner felt it necessary to be hidden. Bearing in mind, it's not that many years ago that we had the satanic abuse situation in Scotland, which was all over the papers, and to be in the public sector following that, I think has been, there's certainly a sense that it would not be wise to speak out. Although things have moved forward, and we're seeing in local government, yes, on the censuses, we're now seeing pagan, which is, I think, a great step forward. And within councils as well, there's, a tick box to say, are you, and paganism is included. But albeit that's there, there's still not a sense that you would necessarily get support, although there's legislation there protecting you. There's still not, there's that sense of it would not be worth the hassle to come out and to be open. So we've just been hidden. I was saying it'll be interesting to see how we feel when we're not constrained in the same way we have been about being able to be open about our faith.
Okay.
Sometimes we have to bite our lips or tongue or whatever, and so part of it is actually how we ourselves are comfortable or not taking on this challenge. And some people I know just say, I can't be bothered. I really can't be bothered. It's just too stressful. And like you said as well, there is a point when people do actually give up, and that's actually the point when we need to have this collaboration, that we do say we are there for each other. And coming back to the organizations, who can you turn to? So I think this is perhaps the most important thing at the moment, is as to as being elders, that we can point people in a particular direction, which could be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Yeah, thank you. So Andras or Jean, can you share any episode you recall of being maybe discriminated, or when you felt judged by, following your path?
There have been many of different degrees. So I'm not going to try to tell you about all of them.
And you're Spanish like me.
Yeah.
We have stories to tell.
That's right. That's right. But, most of my episodes have not been in Spain, have been in the US. And I think one of the things that I've come to understand is that part of what is going on now, back in the 60s and 70s, I was very much involved in the counterculture movement. And nowadays, a lot of people are very cynical about that. And they say, oh, it was all the hippies and this and that. And it was just like free love and lots of drugs and rock and roll. And they dismiss it as if that had been all of it. And in fact, what was really most important is that this was a movement to change culture. Mm-hmm. This was a very complex and very intentional attempt to change Western culture, which until that time had been white, male.
Yeah, in a box, in a white box.
Right. And very, very importantly, Christian, because Christianity really has shaped Western culture since before what we now call Western culture existed. In many ways, it's arguable to say that Christianity created Western culture. They took what the Romans and the Greeks had done and took it way beyond. So a lot in changing culture, it was a change out of and against those kinds of things. And those were the people that were in charge, who had the power. And what happened in the 60s was an attempt to take some of that power back and change it and use it in a different way. And so the people who have wielded that power felt threatened. And I think they continue to feel threatened because they're reading the writing on the wall of history, and they're seeing that within maybe even the end of this century, they will have become obsolete. And they're threatened by that. And so that's, I think, what we're seeing in terms of the right-wing movements and all this stuff is a reaction toward that. But it's probably going to get worse because these people are fighting for what makes them feel powerful. And, I have lost apartments. I have had the tires in my car punctured. I've had death threats. I was once shot at. And, it's very real that some people will go to extremes. That whole idea of thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. There are people who will take that seriously and literally. And so we can't, just because we're enjoying a time of much greater openness and, visibility and credibility and stuff like that, doesn't mean that we can't lose that very quickly. So we have to continue to be watchful.
Yeah. Jane.
Yeah, I mean, from a personal point of view, I've never really had much more than just ridicule. It's only ever been that. And from that point of view, I also worked in the public sector. So any pagan practices or anything that I did was under a pseudonym. So, having retired some years ago, I'm now able to openly speak about things, which is wonderful. I think, harking back to Andreas saying about the sort of hippie era, I kind of came in at the sort of tail end of that, and I was excited by this. It was like a revolution for young people because the older people had held the power for so long. Young people were just dismissed. And now there was this, we can take power, we can do things. We can say we don't want bombs, we don't want this. And the music, I think, for me, was very, very inspirational. You had the Beatles and Donovan and people going off to India and what have you, and speaking with Maharishis, and this was amazing. And yeah, the books of Carlos Castaneda, and this was so inspirational. And I see, to a certain extent, young people now rising up and saying, yeah, we've got to do something about climate change. It's the same determination and the same, I would say, energy that put to good purpose. Yeah, and if we can harness that with the fact of paganism and interfaith, then we could make a better world. We certainly could.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm enjoying the stories very much, because I am slightly younger than you, let's say that. But when I was younger, it was no internet either the way it is, and I just, as you, I went for books, and I went for the inspiration, and I kind of thought I was too late for the fun, because I was not part of all those experiences in the hippie era, and the traveling and everything. And but still, I think younger people now, and I think is this internet and globalization in this way is good, because we managed to be in touch with so many people from many different countries. We have a bigger reach, and so it's very good to be able to connect. When it comes about connections and the work, the work we can do in communities. And so obviously I see the shadows of the internet and the TikTok and all that. But I also want to point out that it's been a great help for pagans to get in touch, and especially being in Spanish. And before I kind of open to the English speaking community, I used to do a lot of work for the Spanish speaking community, not only in Spain but also in Latin America. And before English speaking pagans had to do conferences online, we were doing that for years in the Spanish community, because obviously Spain is here and Latin America is here. And so we had to do our conferences and just be in touch using internet and things like that. So I think it's been great to get people in touch and to communicate and to kind of raise a louder voice together. And I think in that way it's been very beneficial. And I also think that with this, with Facebook and Instagram and social media, everybody kind of becomes a little god on the waves, if you know what I mean. And when some of us try to do work for the community, sadly, sometimes it's seen as ego, or as trying to to do things because of ego, which is not the reason behind it. But I think we need to kind of work harder somehow now, the younger generations, because we need to fight with a lot more things because of this globalization. And it is harder to fight somehow, I think. And also this, there is very serious people sharing online. There's very serious practitioners. They know what they do. They share with respect. And but because of this TikTok and other things, you also got a lot of people sharing nonsense, or you have people kind of focusing, you say pagan, but everyone thinks you're a Satanist because, you know, this Satanist is in TikTok every day and is getting a lot of views, and, you know, people get very confused. So I think there is a lot of misinformation out there, also because of internet.
Mhm.
And I think we need more voices now. Somehow we need more voices now because of this very same reason. You know, the kind of La Plaza de Toros, you know, the bullfighting ring is bigger.
Mm.
So I don't know if what you think about this. What do you think about TikTok?
I mean, it's sort of, I don't know how it portrays pagan paths. I've not experienced a lot of TikTok.
I'm not on TikTok myself, so
I think I've had a small sort of sortie in there and back out again. Yeah, but it concerns me how people approach paganism and Wicca or whatever pagan path. What's motivating them? What, you know, is it image? I know, having gone to a sort of student conference, there was a lot of sort of the fans, the magazine type things were going on, and like witchy spells. Oh, it's exciting to dress like this and to have witchy spells. I mean, of course, when we got involved, there was a lot of pagan jewellery. There was there was a whole lot of things that excited us too. I think it's what holds you there at the end of the day is important.
Yeah, I think one of the things that concerns me is that I'm losing my thread here. That, as you were saying, Jean, that's what draws people to paganism. And I think, you know, thinking at it from a sort of psychological perspective, it can be many of the same reasons that people are drawn to other faiths. It can be that sense of being isolated, lost emotionally, and not in a good place, and that somehow, you know, that this will offer some sort of comfort. And for those who are perhaps have experienced the negative side of the more patriarchal religions, you know, a sort of goddess-centered religion would be seen as something that might be a source of comfort for them. However, I think that the challenge there is that there's a bit more to Wicca than we can't necessarily meet those needs. Ultimately, we are not trained counsellors. We're not able to offer some of the things that I think some of the support and care that people need. We're not necessarily able to provide that. And I think it's about being honest about that as well, and being able to refer people elsewhere if that's the sort of support and care that they need. But I absolutely agree as well. There's that sense of, oh, it's something a wee bit naughty, it's a wee bit you know, exciting and dangerous, you know, that sort of thing, which draws people to it. And, you know, again, I can, I suppose, relate a bit to that as well. But I think perhaps, I'm just wondering whether we need to give more information about, you know, what the craft really involves. Do we need to give more about that, or is that something that some people would be uncomfortable with? So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I want to, because you mentioned mental health and people, you know, needing more than just a faith. And I have to say, I'm very proud to see pagan practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
There are also mental health professionals.
Yeah.
And, you know, we psychologists, you know, we have in the UK, we have almost in between Scotland and England, we have Melissa Harrington, and she's you know, she's amazing. But we have, you know, a lot more pagans that realize how, you know, how people have mental health issues and you know, they struggle with the faith as well.
Yeah.
And I also know that till this point, today, it's still very hard to seek mental health help and say I'm a pagan, because they put you in the nut box. Like, I think that's one of the big fights that, you know, about paganism and mental health. I think is super important. Jean, yes.
No, it's just that, you know, it's bringing to mind the fact, one of the things that the Edinburgh University chaplaincy does is a listening service, because the counselling, you know, the waiting list for counsellor is horrendously long. So we have that, and a lot of the chaplains volunteer for that. And on the back of that, I decided that I would take a counselling course as well. So you know, that has been very beneficial for me too. You know, you get a lot from it yourself, as well as being able to give to others. And I would recommend that to anybody. You know, just take a basic counselling course. It's
especially maybe people in a high position within a tradition. You know, I think it should. You know, I'm totally with you. And I think that's why the work you do in the university, it's very necessary, and it's very good. And Andras and Morgana, you want to?
Well,
I was just. Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was just thinking about, you know, being involved in more than 40 years now. What was really changed? In the beginning, there was little information, and now we have an overkill of information. And the problem is that because of technological advances, I'm not just talking about social media, I'm talking about how, you know, even I can just make things and change things, Photoshop. It's just a minefield. It's an absolute minefield. And unfortunately, it's not just the TikTokers. It's Facebook in general, and our own people who are also spreading a lot of disinformation. And I really am very sad at the moment to see how many people within Wicca, within paganism, are actually destroying each other. I'm more concerned at the moment. I'm not really bothered too much about the TikTok, whatever. I am actually more concerned about our community and how some people are really hell-bent on character assassination via Facebook and all the rest of it. That is my real concern at the moment. So I think from that kind of point of view, and also the effects that people have, you know, because of mental disabilities or any disabilities, those less abled or differently abled, I think it's really hard to you have to, I feel I can do my bit, but it really is only a bit. It's become so immense. And I think that's one of the problems, that a lot of us actually get so overwhelmed by everything that is really negative, destructive, that we actually just give up in the end. And that's where I think some, perhaps, whether it's Pagan Federation, PFI, or any other organization for that matter, I think it's a double-edged sword as well. We should really also, you know, be very honest with ourselves that our community isn't always perfect. Far from it. In fact, our own community can be the worst. You know, so the problem is immense, absolutely immense. On the other hand, I said, well, let's if you feel particularly good at one area, keep to it. Don't try to change the whole world, because we can't, and don't try to influence everybody, because we can't. But what we can do is just be a little bit more aware of the effects of the whole community. And that's sometimes, and I think magically, and this is where I think a lot of people forget, are we magical or not? You know, how can we, as within our own spiritual practice, also, what I call it often spiritual resilience. I think that's something else that we can also help other people. How do we encourage spiritual resilience, whether it's about the environment, whether it's the attack on Facebooks or, you know, whatever. I think that's also something that we can do, as a community. How do we build up that spiritual resilience, which makes us or helps us to at the times we feel overwhelmed, that we can actually say, no, go back to your spiritual practice. You know, within Wicca we have, you know, we follow the moon, hopefully daily. So I think we can do a lot to help people actually just get back to their own center. And in that sense, I think we can do a lot, and the rest will sort itself out. But initially, or I said primarily, I just hope that people will remember we are magical. We are magical people.
Yeah, I like that point.
So spiritual resilience is certainly something I think we can all work on.
Yeah. Andras?
Well, I've never been on TikTok, so I mean, I know vaguely what it is. I see an occasional video snippet somewhere. And the one thing that I do know about it is that frequently some of the younger people in our community will come up to me and say, I'm so upset. I was looking into TikTok and there's all of these people there claiming to be witches, claiming to be high priestesses or this and that and whatever, and they're sort of presuming to teach and set themselves up in this sort of like important position and what have you. And you know, they're like 17 and they have no training and they have no nothing. And what I say to them is, look, you know, there's nothing really that can be done about it, because people will use what we have, the media that we have, and they will use it for their purposes. I think what is important is that if you take yourself seriously, that you put it out, that you put yourself out there so that people see, and put yourself out there on places like TikTok so that people will see that there are other ways of being and other perspectives. I think that is the problem, though, not just for TikTok, but in general, in that I know that this is one of the other the questions that you had lined up, so perhaps I shouldn't really go into it. But I think that increasingly over the years, I felt that a lot of people who call themselves pagans or call themselves witches or druids or whatever, that they don't take it very seriously. It's something they do on occasion, but it's not what shapes and guides and informs their lives, that their lives are not centered around it, are not, that it's not at the center of their lives. And I think that when that happens, the level of practice, and some of these people, I'm not trying to put them down or anything like that. I think they're probably very sincere people, but they just don't know any better because they haven't found anything deeper. But they will go and they'll be engaged with these practices, kind of as if it was a role-playing game. It's something that they do. They have a different name. They have all these little things that they use and they put on, and they do these things, and they speak in languages that they don't really speak, and then they go home, and then they resume their normal lives, and it doesn't change them. And I think that's a key thing that those of us who are trying to help steer the pagan movement to a better place, hopefully in the future, need to be cognizant of, is that you know, fun is wonderful, comfort is wonderful, but when we get too attached to one or the other or both or whatever, then in a way you become an addict, you know, and you're not really taking a look at your life and living it fully. And so I think that there's well, I'll tell you what, some years ago, I was at an interfaith event, And I had just heard from a number of pagans who were trying to get involved in interfaith, and they felt that they were being marginalized by other religions and so on and so forth. And I was talking with this man who is a Christian minister, and he was very pro-pagan. And he said to me, I have to be honest, I think that the interfaith movement, people like me, really want to hear from pagans. I think, we want to make the space for pagans to come and sit at the table with us. We really take paganism seriously. We take pagans very seriously. What I see is that pagans don't take themselves seriously enough.
I think that's a very, very good point. Right. I think that's a very good point. And I think you're making a great point with what you say, because I also say this, for me, pagan is my life, is the way I live. And it's not putting a cloak on doing something one weekend a month or meeting along the calendar, or no, it's part of my everyday life. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's something very serious. And for me, it's not fun. It's a lot of work. I work very hard. Mm-hmm. For my path. I'm trying to work hard to provide safer space for the community, so it's not like I don't do this for fun. I do it because I believe I can put my grain of sand to do something for the community. But I do see, as you say, a lot of pagans that are like weekend pagans or Sabbath pagans, and people that pagans that also, as you mentioned, don't take themselves seriously in the interfaith events, for example. Like you should be at the same level as anyone else, and you should accept it and see that is that way. So I'm very it's very nice to hear that you have pro-pagan Christians, because I know that in Scotland, I'm not very sure if it's only in Paisley or Glasgow, but I know that the interfaith board has like different tiers. So they're all not sitting on the same table. Right. They have pagans and other minority religions like in a different level, which is not very interfaith at all. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a lot of hypocrisy in that you're setting, you have an interface board, but yes, we have these second-class members that they don't have the same power as I do to take decisions, or so I think there is still a lot of work to do also in interfaith.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from the amount of money that organizations can contribute sometimes to the interfaith organization itself, because I know, working with Edinburgh Interfaith, that the churches, the Jewish faith, the Sikhs, the Muslims, the Hindus, all have a bit more money in their coffers. Unfortunately, the Pagan Federation, which is part of that, is spread all over Scotland, and we don't have these sort of funds. So I know that we pay a lower tier of payment. I hope that in Edinburgh it isn't reflected that way. I feel that I'm given equal status. In fact, I'm trusted with the bank account. I'm the secretary now of Edinburgh Interfaith, but I can see how that operates in different levels within Scotland in the interfaith.
Yeah, and it's a shame, because it really should be like everyone sitting in a circle at the same level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got a couple of more points here. One of them was, I know you mentioned some names for books, but who was the person you looked at, like in your time, that was like the pagan, you know, Elbis?
Maybe I can answer that one. First of all, in my time, there weren't that many books.
Same here.
That's point number one. And the books that were around, yeah, the people that influenced me the most, I just wrote down actually, were actually the Farrars, as far as publications. And I think the books from Stuart Farrar, What Witches Do, and the whole series, which is now, you know, The Witch's Bible in America, which I think is a bit of a funny title for 2 books, but anyway. But I also remember the books from Doreen Valiente. I always look forward to when hers were published. Of course, we did get around to get, you know, reading the Gardner books, Witchcraft Today and all the rest of it. But other people who influenced me most were actually people who were writing in magazines. And at that time, of course, there were loads and loads of newsletters around. And as I say, Wiccan Raid at that time was paper. And I had contact with people like Selena Fox. She at the time was involved with Harvest, and Ed Fitch and various other people, Crystal Well and all the rest of it. But one of the other people that influenced me a lot was Marion Green. Marion Green was a very, but as heroes as to how to organize yourself, actually Jean Williams was one of the role models I had for somebody who was actually very involved. She was involved with Pagan Pathfinders, but she never talked about being Wicca. She never talked, and it was always something that I really admired about Jean. She could talk about paganism, she could talk about Wicca, but not actually talk about it. And I think so, as far as being influenced, as I say, not just the authors, but also people like Jean Williams has always been my kind of hero as far as how to behave or how to deal with problems. So I don't know if that helps, but certainly.
Yeah, thank you. The rest of you, Fee or Andres, you got the mics open.
Was it? In the early days, I didn't get much guidance, unfortunately. So it was quite often what I found in the bookshops. What I did find later on was Vivian Crowley's Wicca, which for me it's like, you know, Layers and the Young. It's not a huge book, it's a relatively small book, but there's a huge amount of information in there that can be read on so many levels. I think, as you know, for people coming into the craft, it's
yeah. And I mentioned Melissa Harrington, but obviously I forgot Vivian Crowley, because she is a psychologist and she participates in a lot of projects. And I also have research books where she has she participates in the books. So she's another one, you know, she is one of, you know, or most kind of, you know, she's out there. She's been out there, you know, for forever. And she's a very important face of Wicca. I'm not a Wicca myself, but, you know, I admire her. So, yeah, definitely. I can't believe I forgot her. Andras.
Well, I think I mentioned when I began, I was 19 and I met my teachers. And my teachers were not famous. My teachers were not authors. My teachers were not people who identified publicly as witches or anything like that. This was just their practice. And so at the same time, to me, being a young person who was hungry for some kind of spiritual experience that would really fill me, they were like, you know, I know I put them on a very high pedestal because I had never known people such as they, and so I as soon as I got to know them better, I asked them if they would teach me, and they said yes, and they gave me 4 conditions that if I agreed to, then they would teach me. And one of the conditions was that I not read any books on witchcraft, on paganism, on mythology, on mysticism, on any of these topics, that I not read any books like that unless and until I had talked to them about it and they had approved them, so to speak. And being an avid reader and also being very much into personal liberty, I kind of was not very happy to hear that. And what they explained to me is, they said, look, you don't become a witch by reading books. Witchcraft cannot be taught by books. Witchcraft is taught by experience. What we can do, we can't even give you those experiences. We can lead you to the experiences, and then you have to have them yourself. We can't just pass them to you. So there's so much nonsense out there in what is published that if you were to read those books, you'd be internalizing all of this stuff that then we would have to not only teach you witchcraft, but unteach you these other nonsense that you read. And so eventually I actually came to see the wisdom of that. I know some people I've told the story to became upset that someone would teach me that, tell me that I couldn't read some books, but they were the people that I looked up to. And I didn't really know anything about Wicca, about any of these other things, until my teachers left 5 years later. And then I began looking around, and it was obvious that certainly Wicca was by far the most public and widespread form of modern paganism. I became friends with Wiccans. I participated in their activities and so on. But it was never the thing for me. And to this day, I keep to the practices that my teachers taught me. So I've never really had people who were like authors or who were like public people or, whatever, as role models. I know about them. I've read about them. I know people who knew them. I've met some of them. But, I'm not really impressed by notoriety. I am impressed by the quality of people's lives. And unfortunately, a lot of people put themselves out there because they are seeking attention, because they want to be famous, because they want to make money, whatever. And that's really not, I don't think that speaks very highly of somebody when that's their motivation for trying to make themselves well known. Because what it's actually saying is that there is a void in them that needs to be filled because they're not secure enough in themselves, so they need extra attention and all of these things. And so when I see somebody like who's, I don't want to name names, obviously, but when I see somebody who clearly seems to be coming from that perspective, I just kind of don't have anything to do with them.
Yeah, thank you. Jean.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think I just sat and listened. I was very, very quiet. I just was like a sponge, just absorbing things. I sat at the feet of my initiator and listened. I sat listening to John Score, listened to, I'm naming names, I know, but there are wonderful things that just come from the mouths of a lot of people who've had experience. And I think that's the important thing, is just to sit back and listen and take it in, and don't go headlong into things.
So I think that falls really well into one of the points, like what would you say to the younger generations? What would you say to them? And I think you said something very important. Just don't go for they always just sit and listen. I think is. But what else would you say to the younger generations?
What I've always said, be discerning. It's nothing new. Don't take everything at face value, and try to look. That's what I tried to do with Beyond the Broomstick, was to look behind, find those patterns, find, for example, when you're looking at figurines found in different parts of Europe, different cultures, try and find out a little bit more about being human, you know, what is it like to be a shaman, or where have all these practices come from? I think people, and then you have a little bit more of an idea if somebody's actually speaking a load of rubbish or not, you know. But as I say, it's so difficult these days. I mean, I've been trapped as well, thinking something is true and then finding out later it's been completely fake. So to say, you know, be discerning is easy to say, but today it's so much more difficult, as I see how photographs can be changed.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So
but no, also photographs, the videos you can make without the person really being there.
Yeah. Or I've seen you know, people with t-shirts, and then or photograph somebody with a t-shirt and then and a symbol being sort of transposed on that t-shirt to make them out to be something which they're actually not. So again, being discerning, but it really is hard. And I've seen, you know, I've had apps, you know, there's one called Refacing, and suddenly I was, you know, the Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, I was suddenly Jack Sparrow. And it's so easy.
I know.
5 minutes.
It is scary. It is scary.
Really scary. And so that's why I sometimes think, you know, how can we armor ourselves, armor ourselves in the sense of how can we protect ourselves? And that's why I say using magical techniques, using shields or psychic defense or whatever. I think we can teach those techniques.
Yeah, but I think it's also very important to let them know that there is life outside the computer or their phone.
Absolutely.
The problem is that's not actually true, because internet, cyber, whatever is our existence. We can't step out of it anymore because it's there whether we like it or not. Even just the very fact that you've got these masts all over the place, you're being influenced by all the time. If you're sitting in the trains, you cannot step out of it. That's the whole problem.
But we can still meet outside internet. I mean, that's a reality. We can still meet. I think, you know, like gatherings, you know, pagans gatherings, and leaving the phones at the entrance and just, you know, say no phones and just, you know, going together. And I think Andres could talk about that, because he organized this wonderful festival that I'm hoping to visit at one point. And but I think it is possible to meet outside the web, Morgana. I think it's not only possible, it's necessary to preserve, you know, this kind of sanity, and this, I think it's healthy to create spaces outside of the web to meet, you know, with humans, and you know, I think it's healthy.
And I'll just put one caveat there. The problem is when you meet all these people at these face-to-face meetings, where are they getting their information from? The internet is still influencing the way people are thinking and working. And so even when you meet face-to-face, it doesn't mean to say that's why I say you cannot escape. You cannot escape. And it wouldn't be realistic to even think at a face-to-face meeting you're outside the internet, because you're not. That's what I'm saying. The cyberspace has influenced us so much. And of course, I love to meet people, but, you know, COVID and all the rest of it. But I just think we need to be a little bit more aware of connecting also, as I said, via rituals. You know, why, you know, I've been doing a lot of, you know, when people said, do you participate in online rituals? I say, no, absolutely not. What I do participate in is every month, my coven gets together on the astral. We have our own internet. We've had it all the time. And what I find so disturbing is the fact that people forget, as I say, we work magically. The contact doesn't have to be physical, because we can connect also astrally. And that's why I think that's our greatest strength. That is our greatest strength. If we can encourage people to do, you know, practice the moon rituals together, together, that you build up again the shield or a way of actually coping with it. And what I find is a bit strange during the pandemic, you know, how come so many people would want to participate or not on online rituals? And I was like, wow, people have forgotten that when we do rituals, there is this component of the astral, whatever, the cosmos, and I think that's where we really need to also encourage people to get back together in that sense.
Okay, Andres or Fee or
Sure. When I was young, and in school, we were taught how to engage in critical thinking. We were taught philosophy, psychology, religion, history, politics, all manner of things, topics that were going to be useful for us to be to make us more aware of our lives and how they worked. And at least in the US, for a long time, people have been talking about the so-called dumbing down of America, because a lot of those kinds of what are called the humanities, you know, the social sciences, have been diminished for the sake of things like hard science and business and law and things that are practical and will make you a lot of money and so on and so forth. But the end result is that a lot of younger people have been losing those faculties that some of us were taught in school. And so nowadays, I find often that some of the younger people are not able to discern why something is the way it is, or what is better than something else, or if somebody tells you something, how to question them in a way that will, you know, give you a sense of whether this is to be trusted or not. And with the internet the way it is, with people using pseudonyms and people pretending to be whatever it is that they're not, it becomes very difficult to tell what is real and what is true. You know, and one thing that I say to some of the folks in the younger people in my community is, when you meet somebody and they tell you they're a witch, you haven't met a witch. You've met somebody who claims to be a witch. Now, take it from there and find out what that person means by being a witch, and then you can decide whether, in your terms, that person qualifies as a witch or not. And then that's the decision you make. But don't just accept what somebody tells you. But the other thing I want to go back to, in my community, we have a couple of very large gatherings every year. One is about 500 people. It's been going on for 45 years. And the other one is about 250 people. And those two events take place in a summer camp that we rent in the top of a mountain in a forest near here. And when you get there, there's no internet, and there's not even a Wi-Fi signal. So you are literally cut off from the world of the cyber world. And it becomes really hard for some people. In fact, there are some people who stopped coming because they just couldn't abide being in a place where they couldn't be connected. But at the same time, I think it reminds a lot of people and teaches some of the younger people that there are ways of being in the world that can be very fulfilling, very satisfying, and ultimately much more real than what you find in the cyber world. And so when they come, they have that experience and they take it home, and it changes them. Yeah. And so hopefully over the years, we can contribute in our small way to help to identify the fact that the cyber world is wonderful. There's a lot of wonderful things about it, but it can also be your worst adversary, and that there are alternatives. And at some point, depending on what happens with climate change, we may not have the cyber world anymore. And then what? Mass suicides, right?
Hopefully not.
I can't get Facebook anymore. I'm going to kill myself.
Thank you. Fee, what will you say to the younger generations?
And again, I would pick up on what people have said about be careful. There are an awful lot of people out there who are not what they say they are, and it leads to considerable distress at best. Okay. again, picking up what Andrew said, he spoke about Wicca being experiential, and it's holding on to that as well, because you cannot put this stuff in books. You cannot put what you experience in certain rites into a text and have someone be able to remotely understand what that experience has been. But alongside that, to pick up on the yes, you won't get it in books, I think it's also really important for people to read about ethics, to read about philosophy, to psychology as well. You know, think about, you know, people in the past who have paved the way, you know, Carl Jung, for example, you know, who is given us a much better understanding of how we function as human beings and having souls. So there is a huge amount you can read out there. And again, I suppose it's think about what your expectations are. You know, what are you hoping to get out of this? Because if people are coming in with expectations that can't be met, they can only be let down at the end of it. So I think it's about having a clear understanding about what expectations are when you come into the craft, or any spirituality for that matter.
Thank you. Jean, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, well, I totally concur with what, you know, most people have said.
Continue.
Especially, I totally concur with what most people have said, and especially Fee there, that you can't, you know, this thing doesn't come from books. It comes from listening. It comes from in here. And basically my message that I've always clung on to is, if it doesn't feel right, then it isn't right at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think younger generations are left to find a very difficult balance in, you know, the world, you know, this virtual world that we are all engaged, and how they engage in this reality, you know.
My goddess daughter, Lucia Harrington, is doing a stalwart thing. She was engaged in Extinction Rebellion, but I think she's come a bit into conflict with, you know, factions in there, I think. So she stepped back from that, but it's still not stopping her from being a spiritual warrior.
No. And you know what? I think she's gonna have a great voice
absolutely
for the future generations. I totally see that. Is there anyone, you know, Andres, you're in America, can you point at, because I know names from the younger generations in America. I know these people that have, you know, they have published a book and become like a huge, but do you see someone doing the, you know, good work, not just being on social media? Do you see someone, or Morgana, do you see someone doing work?
I know that there are a lot of younger pagans who have written books and have become very popular in the blogosphere and places like that and whatever. And I read what they've written, and I'm not impressed. I think they're younger people who really don't have enough experience, life experience in general, or enough with witchcraft, but want to get their name out there. And you know, that's their choice. But I will say, in my community, for example,
yeah, talk about what you know your community.
Right. We put a lot of emphasis on the intergenerational aspect of our community, and on the fact that the younger people are fully integrated in the community. And one thing that we like to say is, the younger people are not our future. They are our present. You know, they are very much in the present. And so we learn from them, they teach us, and you know, and so on. And, you know, it's interesting because a couple of years ago, my wife and I were having a conversation with a fairly prominent Unitarian Universalist minister. And in the course of it, he said to us, you know, we have this problem that we cannot keep the young people. They'll come when they're children with their parents and their grandparents, and then when they get to be a certain age, they leave. And so we end up with these churches that are full of very old people, and there's no young people whatsoever. Do you have that problem? And we kind of looked at each other and we said, well, we have the opposite problem. Our young people don't just stay, but they become very, very active in the community, and then they bring their friends, and they bring their lovers, and they bring their classmates, and then they stay, and then, you know, and we have the situation where there are people there that I knew as little toddlers, you know, and now they're married and have children of their own. And so and that's happened within the community. So when you see that, this is all modeling for the younger people as well. And I think that that it's very important to cultivate our relationship as not only as relatives, as teachers, but as friends, and also as students. Because if we can't learn from younger people, then we have a problem, because they have a lot to teach.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good one, because younger people actually have, for example, problems that we didn't have.
Right.
And I think we also, in a way, have to relearn or learn some new ways that are happening, you know, and at the moment. So I think that was a really good one. Anyone else have something to add? Because we are about to close the panel. So mics are open.
I would just say to everybody, you know, don't lose heart. Don't lose. I'm the eternal optimist, and whether it's TikTok or it'll be something else. I remember the advent of internet. Whoa! Because we were around. We didn't have mobile telephones. We didn't have internet. I traveled to India. I didn't have a telephone. How did I manage? I didn't have booking.com and what I still encourage people to do. It's a magical quest. It's a magical quest, and enjoy. Don't get disheartened. So I think we can do a lot to encourage people to be optimistic about the future, and, as I say, lead a magical life. That's the only real advice I can give to both young and old, and especially one group of people we haven't mentioned are actually a lot of women who did not have time when in their 20s and 30s and 40s because they were too busy bringing up the children and all the rest of it. So I have a group of women, middle-aged women, who are actually discovering Wicca now for the first time. And so this is another group of people who we can really help. Again, it's just, you know, being in contact with people, reaching out to people, leave no one behind. That's one of the devise or the things that the United Nations are talking about. And that also includes our community as well. Leave no one behind. Don't assume that everybody can get internet or what have you. And I think that's something for all of us to take to heart. And as I say, don't give up. Meet once when the moon is full, do healing work, and continue our magical practice. So that's the advice I'd give to everybody.
Thank you, Morgana. Thank you. What will be the rest of you closing words for this wonderful panel?
I think this has been a really lovely discussion. It's one of those, I don't know that we necessarily wanted to stop. There's people here that I've met for the first time who I would love to hear more from and have further discussion with. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you to my fellow panelists as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, I know we could continue talking for hours, and that's the reality, right?
It's been lovely. It's been lovely sharing thoughts and ideas. Yeah.
And some of us will be meeting face to face very soon.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
So,
Yeah, I'm lucky because at least I got Fee and I got Jean not too far.
Well, I'm very happy to meet. Well, I've known Ness and Morgana for a while, but the others of you, very happy to meet you, and I hope we can meet in person sometime
Absolutely, absolutely.
We have family in Scotland, so we would go to Scotland every couple of years, and because of COVID, we haven't been able to for a while. So I think our next pending trip is to go to Scotland. So we'll see.
Yeah, I vote for that. Please come.
Definitely.
Yep, definitely. That sounds brilliant.
Yeah, please come.
Yep.
Well, thanks again, Ness, and take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Take care.
It's been a pleasure. It's been, I think, very educational, and I hope it will be for those, you know, listening to this panel. And obviously, we couldn't touch every single point, or you know, it was quite fluid. But I hope with, you know, the things we shared will light, you know, we both in someone's mind, or will help somehow, or that was the purpose of this.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I see you all soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.